She gave birth under the eclipse, and the baby's flame mark would change the West forever. The desert wind howled across the barren land of Arizona in 1879, kicking dust into the night air and carrying it like whispers from some far-off reckoning. In the dim, orange dusk, a girl knelt beneath a crooked Joshua tree, the folds of her dress whipped around her legs, her arms trembling around a swollen belly. She was no older than 18, and already the world had turned its back on her. From the ridge above, a group of villagers watched from behind kerchiefs and fear. One spat into the dirt. "She carries no name for the Father." Another added, "Talks to the wind like it talks back." They left her there, cast out from the church steps where she'd begged for mercy. The preacher locked the door behind her, like sin might seep through the wood. Bo McAllister wasn't a man who went looking for lost souls. At 40, he'd buried his wife, lost a child, and worn more dust on his boots than most men did in a lifetime. He came through the canyon trail with a half-wild horse tethered behind him, a rifle slung loose over his shoulder, and the kind of silence that didn't need explanation. He spotted her in the glow of a dying sun, half collapsed in the dirt, head bowed but eyes wide open, watching him like she already knew he would stop. He did, dismounted, stood still. "You lost?" he asked. She didn't answer. Her breath was shallow, eyes dry but full of something more dangerous than tears. She didn't beg, didn't even flinch when he stepped closer. He saw the way she held her belly, protective, fragile, proud. Behind him, one of the townsfolk shouted down the ridge, voice slurred with drink. "Leave her, McAllister. That girl's been cursed, carrying the spawn of some nameless sin." Bo looked back once, then turned to the girl. "What's your name?" he asked. Her lips moved. "June." It was enough. He crouched down and extended a hand. "Can you walk?" She hesitated, then nodded. He helped her up, steadying her with one hand while the other took her bundle, if it could even be called that. A ragged blanket, some bread crusts, and a small carved talisman she clutched like it held more than wood. Bo didn't speak as he lifted her onto the horse and walked beside it, leading them down the trail and toward the cabin he kept beyond the creek bed, just far enough to avoid questions, just close enough to still count as civilization. When he opened the door that night, the cabin smelled of cedar smoke and old leather. She stepped in slowly, eyes scanning the one-room shelter with its single cot, a table, and firewood stacked high in the corner. He pointed to the bed. "You'll sleep there." She shook her head. "Floor's fine. I'm not taking in a pregnant girl just to let her freeze on the boards. Take the bed." She did, wordlessly. He stoked the fire, cooked beans and salt pork in a cast-iron pan while she sat with her hands folded over her belly, like a mother and protector in one. Later, as the fire burned low and the wind howled louder than before, she asked without looking at him, "Why'd you take me in?" Bo leaned back in his chair, rubbing the back of his neck. He didn't answer right away. Then, softly, "I lost a son, 2 winters ago. Burned in a fire set by folks fighting over land that never belonged to any of us. I can't fix that, but I won't watch another child die while I do nothing." She didn't reply, but for the first time since he'd found her, she slept without her arms around herself. The next morning, someone knocked on the cabin door. An older rancher, part of the same town that cast her out, stood there with a shovel in one hand and suspicion in the other. "You letting that girl stay?" he asked. Bo stepped outside, closing the door behind him. "She's not yours to worry over." The man scowled. "She talks like a witch, you know. Carries no man's name. You want to bring that into your house?" Bo looked at him for a long moment, then said, plain and cold, "I once held my son's ashes in my hands. If you think I'm afraid of a girl carrying life, you're dumber than you look." The man left, grumbling. Inside, June sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a cup of water. She didn't ask what was said. She just watched Bo, like she was still trying to figure out what kind of man would choose to care for someone the world had already thrown away. He didn't smile, didn't soften. But that night, when she left a small drawing scratched into the cabin wall, a bird with wings outstretched in the wind, he touched it and didn't erase it. Something was changing, and neither of them yet knew what kind of miracle the desert had begun to breathe into life. The desert held its breath. In the weeks that followed, June and Bo lived beneath the same roof but in silence so thick it could smother a fire. Bo was a man of few words to begin with, but around her, this strange girl who talked to wind and drew wolves on his door, he found his throat tightening even more. She never asked for more than a blanket and her share of the cornbread. She spent her mornings sweeping the front porch, afternoons sorting herbs she had gathered from the hills, and evenings sketching odd symbols in charcoal on the wooden siding of the cabin. Wolves with open mouths, a black sun over jagged mountains, a hand, palm up, with 3 drops falling from its center. Bo watched from a distance, hammering fence posts, hauling water, and mending saddles. But when she crouched near the wild sagebrush, he found himself slowing, watching her tilt her head as if the desert whispered secrets to her. One morning, thunder cracked in the far distance. The sky was still blue, not a single cloud overhead. But June, barefoot and wide-eyed, ran to pull down the laundry and shutter the windows. "It's not raining," Bo said, arms crossed. "It will," she replied simply, tying the last shutter with hands that did not tremble. That night the storm hit hard, rain slamming against the roof, lightning tracing the horizon like ghost fire. Bo stared at her across the table. She didn't look smug, just tired, just certain. Another day, as he walked near the corral, he found her frozen in place, her arm outstretched toward a pile of rocks. "Snake," she signed, pointing with her eyes. Sure enough, a rattler coiled silently beneath the sun-baked stones. She had not heard it. She had felt it. She never explained how. Bo began to wonder. That evening, long after the dishes were washed and the wind had settled, he found her sitting in the tall grass behind the house, just at the edge of the arroyo. She rocked slightly, one hand resting over her swollen belly, the other tracing circles in the air. Her lips moved, barely, like she was murmuring to someone not there. He stood a few feet behind, unsure whether to approach. Finally he cleared his throat. "What are you doing?" June turned to him. Her eyes reflected starlight, and something deeper, something old and patient. "I'm talking," she said. "To who?" "To the baby, to the wind, to whoever listens." She paused. "You don't have to believe in it." Bo frowned. "Seems like talking to air." She tilted her head, studying him. "You think silence means nothing, that hearing is the only way to know something is real." He shifted his stance. "Most folks do." "That's their mistake," she said, standing slowly. Her belly curved full against her dress, the shape of life not yet born, but already strong. "I'm not crazy, Bo." He blinked. She rarely said his name. "I'm not cursed. I'm not weak. I just hear things you don't. The ground speaks if you know where to listen. The sky warns before it opens. The baby kicks harder when something bad's about to happen." She walked past him then, brushing his arm lightly. "I'm not crazy. I just hear what you've forgotten how to." He stood there a long time after she'd gone inside. The wind tugged at his coat. Somewhere in the dark, a coyote howled. And for the first time in a long while, Bo didn't feel alone in the silence. Bo had never been one to believe in anything he could not hold in his hands. Land, firewood, a broken bridle, grief. These were things he knew, solid, sharp, undeniable. Prophecies were for preachers. Magic was for fools. But June didn't ask him to believe. She just told the story. They sat by the fire one night, her belly round and taut beneath a worn cotton dress, the shadows of flame dancing across the walls. She spoke slowly, as if choosing each word with care. "His name was Kiayani," she said. "His father was a Navajo medicine man, one of the old ones. He said that one day his blood would cross with the blood of outsiders. Not for war, for healing." Bo didn't look up from the fire. "And you believe that?" June smiled faintly. "I didn't at first. I thought it was just a boy's way of making a girl feel special, but he said it again the night he left. Our child will be a bridge. Between people, between storms." Bo grunted. "Sounds like a nice line." June leaned back, both hands on her belly. It wasn't a line, it was a warning. He knew he wouldn't stay. He knew the child would come in darkness, under an eclipse. That made Bo glance up. What? There's going to be an eclipse, she said quietly. Soon. He scoffed, but not harshly. I'll believe that when the sun disappears. 2 nights later, it did. The sky had been strange all day, cloudless but too still, like the wind was holding its breath. Just before dusk, the light began to change. Not dim like twilight, but cold, gray, unnatural. Shadows stretched long and sharp, and birds stopped singing. Bo stood on the porch, rifle in hand, not for any real reason, just a habit. The animals were restless. Even the wind made no sound. Then he heard her scream. He dropped the rifle and ran inside. June was on the floor beside the bed, her face pale, drenched in sweat. "It's time," she gasped. "Now." He cursed under his breath and lifted her gently, placing her on the mattress. "You sure?" Her hands clutched his wrist, tight as rope. "The sun, it's gone. It's now." Outside, the eclipse reached its peak. Daylight vanished. The desert went still. Inside, June labored, her cries swallowed by silence so complete it felt sacred. Bo had delivered calves, once even a foal, but nothing could have prepared him for this. He wiped her brow with trembling hands, murmured encouragement, even though he knew she couldn't hear it. Still, she looked into his eyes and somehow understood. Hours passed. Then came the child. He arrived in silence, no screams, no chaos, just a breath, a blink, a presence. A boy, small, fierce, alive. Bo wrapped him in the soft cloth June had prepared and held him up to the light. That's when he saw it. On the baby's left shoulder, just below the blade, was a mark, deep red, shaped like fire. Not a rash, not a bruise, a birthmark in the shape of a flame, as though the child had been kissed by something ancient and burning. June reached out, her fingers brushing the mark. Her eyes filled, not with fear, but knowing. "He's the one," she whispered, tears streaking her cheeks. "The bridge, just like they said." Bo sat back, the child in his arms, his mind spinning. The eclipse began to pass. Light returned slowly, filtering through the window. He looked at June, pale but smiling, half broken but whole. He looked at the child, breathing soft, hand curled into a fist, flame on his skin. And he remembered something he had buried for years. The night his own child died. The fire, the screams, the emptiness that followed. He had begged whatever gods there were to give him something back, a reason to believe again. Now he held that reason in his arms. The desert had taken many things from Bo, but tonight it gave something back. And though he did not yet know how, Bo understood this child, this miracle, would change everything. June named the child Kale, a name from his father's people, meaning firelight in darkness. It suited him from the first breath, eyes wide open, never crying unless something truly unsettled him. Always watching, always listening without ears. Bo built him a cradle from juniper and willow, lined it with wool, and set it near the hearth. He told himself he was just doing what any decent man would. But when he looked down at Kale's sleeping face, at the flickering mark on his shoulder that looked more and more like a dancing flame, he felt something crack in his chest, a weight loosening, like ice melting after years of drought. Kale grew fast. Before he could crawl, he would reach for sunlight through the window, fingers curling like he was trying to grasp it. He laughed at the sound of drums echoing from the far ridges, tribal rhythms from unseen fires, but would cry when distant gunshots rang from neighboring ranches. Bull watched, confused. "He don't even know what a gun is," he muttered one night, holding the boy close after another fit of tears. "How can he hate something he's never heard?" June didn't answer. She was carving symbols into the old porch posts, circles, animals, hands with open palms. "He doesn't hate it," she said softly. "He feels it, like thunder before the sky breaks." One morning, Bo set out to check the south line fence, riding old Boone through the narrow ravine where the rocks crumbled like sand under pressure. He told June he'd be back by sundown. He didn't come back. Back at the homestead, June fed Cale, swept the floors, and tried to calm the unease tightening in her chest. The baby would not stop crying. It wasn't hunger. It wasn't a dirty cloth. He screamed, not in pain, but in alarm, fists clenched, eyes wide, screaming toward the horizon. June felt it then, too. Something was wrong. She left Cale, wrapped on her back, and rode the spare mule straight into the ravine. She found Bo pinned under Boone, a twisted leg and a rock fall nearly crushing them both. His rifle was broken, his voice hoarse from calling. He looked up when he saw her, stunned. "How did you—" "Cale," she said. He knew. Bo stared at the boy on her back, now quiet, eyes steady. The flame on his shoulder peeked from under the blanket, pulsing with the rhythm of his heart. It took hours to lift the horse and pull Bo free, but they made it home. That night Bo sat at the edge of the bed, his ankle wrapped, his pride bruised. "He's not like us," he said finally. "Is he?" June shook her head. "No, but he's what this place needs." "Some of the men down in Hala Wells are talking," Bo muttered. "Say the boy ain't white or red. Say he don't belong." June looked at him long, then stepped outside and pressed her hand into the earth. "If you don't believe, then watch how the ground opens for him. Watch how animals calm when he's near. Watch how the storms shift when he cries." Bo followed her outside. The sky above was deep with stars, the air dry and still. The world felt pause. Cale was lying in his cradle by the fire, awake, eyes wide and curious. He made no sound, but when Bo leaned close, the boy reached up and touched his beard with tiny fingers. No fear, no hesitation. Something in that touch, unspoken, innocent, and knowing, went deeper than words. Bo didn't answer June. He didn't need to. He just stayed there beside the cradle for a long time, listening, not with his ears, but with something older and more honest. Something inside him that had finally begun to open. Bo did not know the moment it changed, not precisely, but somewhere between Cale's first laugh and June's quiet humming in the morning as she stirred the pot over the fire, something inside him began to soften. Not break, not collapse, just yield. June was no longer the frightened girl who had stumbled into his camp with dust in her hair and fire in her belly. She had grown, stronger, quieter, more sure of her place in the world, even when the world refused to make room for her. She walked with a calm that Bo recognized from years tracking wild horses, silent, steady, unshakable. Cale followed her everywhere. His little hands mimicked her signs. His eyes watched her like she was the only map he would ever need. In the afternoons, she showed him how to tap rhythms on old hide drums she had stretched and tied herself. He would laugh and tap back, his patterns strange but right, somehow. Bo, for his part, made him a horse. He carved it from pine with tools dulled from years of disuse. It was not smooth, nor was it finely painted, but when he placed it in Cale's small hands, the boy held it to his chest like it was alive. "Don't think he knows what to do with it," Bo muttered. June smiled, brushing Cale's curls from his eyes. "He does. He just hasn't ridden yet." They did not speak of love, not the kind that came with rings or promises, but every night, when the lamps were lit and the baby slept, they lingered longer in the same room, shared silence like others might share music, let their glances hold a second too long. Then came the night Cale fell ill. It started with a fever, nothing high, but enough to make his breath quick and his skin hot to the touch. June stayed at his side, pressing cool cloths to his head, whispering words in a language Bo did not know. By midnight, the fever spiked. Cale whimpered in his sleep, tossing, his limbs trembling. June rocked him, tears shining in her eyes but not falling. Bo watched from the doorway, helpless. His mind screamed with memories he had buried deep. The scent of smoke, the sound of crackling timbers, the small form of a daughter lost to fire years ago. He had told himself he could never hold another child and not feel the ghost of that loss whisper in his ear. But when June looked up, eyes pleading not with panic but with something else, trust, he crossed the room. Together they sat by the low burning coals of the hearth, June cradling Cale, Bo wrapping blankets tighter around them both. The wind outside howled, but in the cabin it was just breath and heartbeat and the slow ticking of time. Bo took her free hand, not out of duty, not from guilt, but because he wanted to. Her fingers were cold from the water bowl. His thumb brushed the curve of her knuckles. "I once lost a whole world," he said quietly, voice low like it might crack if spoken too loud. "And now, two people knock at my door. I don't know how to let them in without breaking." June didn't speak. She only turned her hand in his, palm up, and squeezed. As dawn broke, Kyle's fever broke too. He slept, limp but peaceful. June rested her head on Bo's shoulder, and for the first time, he didn't flinch from the weight. He leaned into it. And in that still, golden hour before day fully arrived, something shifted between them. It was not a declaration, not a vow, but it was a beginning. The air changed before the storm arrived, not the kind with clouds or wind, but the kind that moved through men's eyes and women's whispers. Whispers about a boy with a flame on his back, about a girl who spoke with wind, about a man who should have known better than to take in the child of a prophecy. The first rider came from the canyon, his face painted, his braids tight with beads that spoke of his clan. He carried no weapon, but wore the red sash of the Yahatihi, those who walked with the peacemakers. Bo met him at the edge of the field, Cale resting on his hip. "I was sent," the man said, "to see the child, the one born during the dark sun." Bo shifted Cale to his other arm. "He is just a boy." "Nay, maybe. Or he may be the one the old stories speak of." "I do not believe in stories," Bo said. "Belief is not required," the man replied. "Only truth." The man stayed one night, silent as stone. He did not ask to hold Cale, only watched from across the room, lips moving with words from a language Bo could not catch. In the morning he left, no farewell, no threat. But word had already reached the town. At first it came as a question. "That the child out there, he got a mark on him, don't he?" Then it turned into worry. "You hear what them Navajos say? That he's supposed to bring peace or fire?" And finally, as it always did, it turned into fear. "They should leave," one man said at the saloon. "Take that cursed child far from here." "He's just a baby," another said. "Babies grow. And if he's got something in him that stirs up the land, do you want to wait until it's too late?" June kept to the cabin. Cale clung tighter than usual, his body tense, even when she tried to soothe him. She painted less, spoke less, even to the wind. Bo rode into town only when needed. But one morning a message awaited him, scrawled across the door of the supply shop. No more half-blood prophets. No more cursed mouths. Below it, a smear of ash. He rode home faster than he ever had. That night he built a fire higher than usual and stood before it while June sat with Cale inside. "I used to think we could outlive the world if we just stayed quiet," Bo said to the flames. "But quiet does not mean safe." He turned to June. "They're afraid of what he might be." June's eyes were fierce, steady. "He will be what we raise him to be." "But what if we're wrong?" Bo's voice cracked. "What if they're right to be afraid?" She rose, crossed the floor, placed Cale into his arms, and said, "Then let them be afraid of the love that holds instead of the hate that burns." The next day, a council was called in town. Bo went alone, Cale's small carved horse tucked into his pocket. He stood before the mayor, the preacher, and the men who had never once helped him fix a fence, but had much to say about his morals. "You all want to know what he is," Bo said, voice loud over the murmurs. "He's a child, not a weapon, not a sign, just a child. But a child marked by legend," one man barked. "Legends are made by frightened men," Bo snapped. "But the future? That's built by the ones who choose what kind of men they'll be." A hush fell. He took a breath. "That child will be the reason men stop killing, or the reason they start again. But make no mistake, it won't be because of who he is. It'll be because of what we chose to believe." No one answered. When Bo returned home, June was waiting on the porch. Cale was asleep in her arms. "What did they say?" she asked. "I'm thinking, is that good? It's better than screaming." And in that fragile quiet between threats and peace, the fire burned steady through the night. The sun hung low over the Arizona ridge, casting long golden lines across the dry basin. The air was heavy, not with heat, but with a tension that buzzed beneath the surface like bees trapped in glass. The spring had been cruel, barely a trickle left in the shared stream, and now the townfolk and the Navajo warriors stood across from each other at the river's edge, weapons gripped, mouths tight with words unspoken for too long. Cale, now nearly 2, had wandered unnoticed through the dust. His feet, small but certain, carried him straight into the clearing, where silence had gathered like storm clouds. Bo spotted him first, his heart seized. "Cale!" he shouted, voice cracking like dry wood. He ran, June right behind him, but neither reached the boy in time. Cale stood between the two hostile groups, tiny body dwarfed by rifles and spears, his drum slung over his shoulder like a talisman. He looked up at the gathering storm of men and sat down. Then he began to play. Tiny hands beat the drum with strange, soft rhythm. He sang, not in English nor in any known language, but in a song made of breath and breathlessness, of memory not learned but born into. His voice lilted in tones neither parent had taught him, notes carried on the rising wind. Everyone froze. The murmurs ceased, even the rifles lowered a fraction. Then the wind shifted. It curled around the clearing like a snake coiling, and the sky above dimmed. Clouds gathered, though the sun had shone moments before. The ground beneath Cale trembled, subtle but firm. The stream gurgled, a fresh, clean burble, though no water had flowed freely in weeks. The old Navajo elder stepped forward, slowly. His eyes were locked on the boy. "He does not speak as we do," he said, voice grave, "but the land listens." Cale's drumbeat stopped. His eyes found Bo's. Bo felt it, like someone looking not just at him, but through him, into him. All the hurt, the loss, the disbelief, it cracked under that gaze. June fell to her knees, tears streaking her dusty cheeks. "He was born for this," she whispered. "For this moment." Bo knelt beside her, one arm protectively around her shoulders, the other reaching toward Cale. On the other side, the townsfolk shifted. One woman lowered her shotgun. A man let go of his grip on a rusted revolver. The elder raised a hand. "If he is what the prophecy spoke of," he said slowly, "then let this day be remembered not for the blood we did not spill, but for the child who reminded us what still flows beneath this land." No one spoke. No one fired. Cale stood, eyes still wide, as if seeing beyond what anyone else could. Then he toddled back toward his mother and Bo, crawled into June's lap, and laid his head against her chest. Bo looked up. The two groups, so close to war, had taken a step back. Peace had not been declared, but for the first time in years, it had not been shattered. Cale had not needed words. His heart had spoken louder than any bullet. And the world, for once, had listened. Years passed, but the land remembered. Not in loud ways, not in the kind told by drums or guns, but in softer things, in tracks worn smooth by shared horses, in campfires lit by hands once ready to strike, now offering warmth. Bo and June stayed. They did not leave Arizona, though they could have. Instead, they built something out of the dust and the scars. A relay station just off the main pass between the nearest town and the distant mesas. They called it simply the Midway. There, wagons from the east stopped for water. Navajo riders rested their horses. Children played under the cottonwoods. No one asked where someone came from. No one was told to leave. Cale grew tall and strong, the red mark on his shoulder fading into something less visible, but never forgotten. He laughed more than he spoke, and when he did speak, it was often just to ask how someone really was. He seemed to know before they answered. "Your knee hurts," he would say to a cowboy who had not limped. Or, "She's sad," about a woman who had not yet cried. People came to think of him as something in between, A bridge, yes, but also a light, one that flickered no matter the wind. Beau aged, his beard grew silver, his hands more weathered, but he no longer flinched at firelight or thunder. Each evening he sat with June beneath the same Joshua tree where he had once found her, now grown taller, branches outstretched like a witness. One day, a traveling scholar, thin, dusty, carrying notebooks and worn boots, arrived at the midway. He stayed 2 nights, scribbled the story of the boy with the fire-marked shoulder, of the day the earth spoke peace through a toddler. On the morning of his departure, the man asked Beau, "Why did you take her in, that girl, all those years ago?" Beau stood still, then slowly he looked toward the paddock. Cale was there, helping a young Navajo girl onto a pony, steadying her with a quiet patience that felt older than him. Beau's voice was low, steady. People said she was cursed, that the child would bring ruin. He turned, meeting the scholar's eyes. "But the truth is, I had nothing left. I was just waiting to die slower than most. Then she came, quiet, brave, carrying something holy in her belly, and not once asking to be saved." He pointed toward Cale, who now ran alongside the pony, laughing as the little girl clung to the reins. "That boy, he is not just a prophecy, he is proof that pain doesn't have to be the end of our stories." He paused, then added softly, "If anyone asks why I kept the girl, it's because the child kept me." That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the ridge, painting the sky in wild pinks and oranges, June brought Beau a tin cup of coffee and sat beside him on the porch. Cale came up behind them, slid his arms over their shoulders. And for a long while, none of them spoke. They did not need to. Because some stories, like the best ones, never really end. Some people are born with silence in their mouths, but thunder in their hearts. And some children come into this world not to follow old paths, but to carve new ones, between blood and belief, between wounds and wonder. This was not just a story about a widower who gave shelter. It was about what he received in return, a reason to hope again, a reason to choose love over fear, again and again. If this story moved you, if it made you believe in second chances, quiet miracles, and the power of listening with more than just your ears, then there are more where that came from. Subscribe to Wild West Love Stories for tales of forbidden love, sacred promises, and hearts that refuse to be buried by dust or time. Because in this land of guns and ghosts, sometimes love speaks loudest in silence. Hit that subscribe button and ride with us to where the West still whispers love.